We don't hire your kind of people. The words fell like bullets on Maria Elena Rodriguez. The man in front of her, impeccably dressed in a suit that cost more than a year's rent, looked at her with the same disgust reserved for something unpleasant stuck to the sole of a shoe. Richard Wellington adjusted his Italian silk tie and let his cold eyes drift over the young woman before him. His office on the 47th floor breathed power, floor-to-ceiling windows, solid mahogany desk, paintings worth fortunes. Everything designed to intimidate. "Excuse me, Mr. Wellington, but I don't understand." "You don't understand?" His smile was cruel, calculated. "Look around you, girl. This is Wellington and Associates. We manage the largest fortunes in the country. Our clients expect a certain standard." Maria felt as if the air had been ripped from her lungs. She had made it this far after 5 interviews. She had studied every night after cleaning offices, had memorized every detail about the company, had prayed until she fell asleep over her books. "Sir, my academic record is impeccable. I graduated with honors, I speak 3 languages, I have experience in—" "Your record doesn't matter," he interrupted, rising from his leather chair. "What matters is image. And you," he pointed at her with disdain, "you don't have the image we project here." The silence became deafening. Maria could hear her own heart beating like a war drum. Her hands trembled slightly, but she kept her gaze steady. "Are you referring to the color of my skin, Mr. Wellington?" Richard walked to the window, turning his back to her. His reflection in the glass showed a satisfied smile. "I'm referring to the fact that our clients have expectations. When they see someone like you, they don't think about professional competence. They think about, well, the type of person who cleans offices, not one who runs them." Every word was a stab. Maria closed her eyes for a second, feeling humiliation spread through her chest like acid. In her mind, her grandmother's voice echoed, "Mija, when the world closes doors on you, remember that God can open windows." "I understand your position perfectly, Mr. Wellington," she said with a voice that surprised her with its firmness. "But I'd like you to understand mine." He turned, arching an eyebrow with mocking curiosity. "My son is sick. He needs medications that cost $3,000 a month. I've worked since I was 15, I've studied at night, I've sacrificed everything to get here. I didn't come to beg. I came to offer my talent in exchange for a fair opportunity." "Your talent?" Richard let out a laugh that echoed through the office. "Dear, talent without the right connections is worthless in this world. And people like you, simply don't have the right connections." He walked to his desk and pressed the intercom button. "Jennifer, please escort Miss. What was your name?" "Rodriguez. Maria Elena Rodriguez. Escort Miss Rodriguez to the exit. And make sure security knows she shouldn't return." The door opened and a perfectly groomed blonde entered with a fake smile. "This way, please," Jennifer said, avoiding eye contact. Maria collected her portfolio with dignity. Before leaving, she stopped at the threshold and turned toward Wellington. "Mr. Wellington, there's something you should know about the right connections." "Oh, really? And what's that?" "Sometimes they're closer than one imagines." Richard frowned, but Maria had already left. Her heels echoed in the marble hallway like hammer blows. Each step took her further from her last hope, or so she believed. In the elevator, as she descended the 47 floors toward the cruel reality of the street, Maria closed her eyes and whispered, "Our Father who art in heaven, give me strength for what's coming." She didn't know that on Richard Wellington's desk, beneath a pile of important documents, lay forgotten a photograph from 20 years ago. A photograph where a young Wellington smiled alongside a distinguished dark-skinned man and a beautiful woman who looked extraordinarily like the young woman he had just rejected. A photograph that, had he seen it, would have changed everything. But that revelation would have to wait. For now, Maria Elena Rodriguez walked through the streets of New York with a broken heart, not knowing she had just planted the seed of the biggest storm Richard Wellington had faced in his life. The cold November air hit Maria's face like an additional slap. Her legs trembled, not from the cold, but from the humiliation that still burned in her veins like liquid fire. "Ma'am? Are you all right?" The security guard's voice pulled her from her trance. She was standing on the sidewalk, motionless, with her gaze lost in the skyscrapers that rose like giants of glass and steel. How many times had she dreamed of working in one of those buildings? How many nights had she studied imagining this moment? Yes, I'm fine, she lied, adjusting the strap of her worn purse. But she wasn't fine. Nothing was fine. She walked toward the subway station, each step heavier than the last. Wellington's words echoed in her head like a broken record, "We don't hire your kind of people. Your kind of people." As if she were a different species, something less human. The train arrived packed with people returning home after a successful day at their jobs. Jobs that were denied to her because of the color of her skin. She managed to find a seat in the corner and took out her phone. She had 3 missed calls from the daycare. Her heart stopped. "Mrs. Rodriguez?" Mrs. Garcia's voice sounded worried. "Santiago has had another episode. His fever spiked to 102 degrees. I took him to the hospital, but..." "What hospital?" Maria jumped to her feet, ignoring the annoyed looks from other passengers. "General Hospital. Pediatric emergency room. Maria, the doctors said he needs the medication soon or..." The line went dead. Maria stared at the black screen of her phone as if it were a death sentence. Her son. Her 6-year-old baby. The only good thing in her life was fading away, and she had no money to save him. The tears came without warning, hot and bitter. She covered her face with her hands, trying to contain the sobs that threatened to escape. An elderly woman sitting across from her offered her a tissue. "Thank you," Maria whispered. "Whatever it is, child, remember that God never gives us more than we can bear." "Really?" Maria wanted to scream. She wanted to ask where God was when Wellington humiliated her. Where he was when her son struggled to breathe every night. Where he was when she worked 3 jobs and still couldn't afford the medications. But instead, she nodded and murmured, "Thank you, ma'am." The train stopped at her station. Maria got off and ran toward the hospital, her heels clicking on the wet pavement. General Hospital loomed before her like a red brick fortress. She had spent so many nights here in recent months that the guards already knew her by name. "Pediatrics, 3rd floor," the guard told her without being asked. She climbed the stairs 2 at a time. The elevators were too slow when a mother's heart was at stake. The hallway smelled of disinfectant and despair. She knew that smell too well. "Santiago Rodriguez?" She asked at the nursing station. "Room 312. Dr. Ramirez wants to speak with you." Dr. Ramirez was an older man with kind eyes that had seen too much suffering. When he saw Maria, his expression softened. "Maria, we need to talk. How is he?" "Stable for now." "But Maria," he removed his glasses and cleaned them slowly. "His condition is worsening. Without the medications, I'm afraid that..." "How much time do I have?" 2 weeks. Maybe 3 if we're lucky. 2 weeks. Maria felt as if the ground opened beneath her feet. 2 weeks to get $3,000 she didn't have. 2 weeks to save her son. "Doctor, is there any assistance program? Any way to..." "We've already applied for all available programs." "I'm sorry, Maria. I know you fought hard." She entered room 312 and her heart shattered into 1,000 pieces. Santiago slept connected to monitors, his small chest rising and falling with difficulty. At 6 years old, he had already fought more battles than many adults. She approached the bed and took his warm little hand. "Hello, my love. Mommy's here." Santiago opened his eyes, those big, beautiful eyes he had inherited from her. "Mommy, did you get the job?" Maria felt her voice breaking. How could she tell him no? How could she explain that the world was cruel to people like them? "I'm still waiting for an answer, sweetheart." "It's okay, Mommy. God is going to help us. You always tell me that." Yes, she always told him that. But at this moment, sitting next to her dying son's bed, after the greatest humiliation of her life, Maria wondered if God was really listening to them. She stayed there until Santiago fell asleep again. Then she went out to the hallway and headed to the hospital chapel. It was small and simple, with wooden benches and a simple crucifix on the altar. She knelt in the first row and for the first time in years, spoke to God not as a faithful devotee, but as a desperate mother. "I don't understand your plan," she whispered, tears flowing freely down her cheeks. That man humiliated me today. He treated me like I was trash. And my son, my innocent child, is up there fighting for his life. She covered her face with her hands. If there's a reason for all this, show it to me. Because right now, I don't see hope anywhere. The silence of the chapel enveloped her like an embrace. But in that silence, something changed. A strange calm took hold of her. It wasn't resignation. It was something deeper. It was the certainty that this story wasn't over. She got up, dried her tears, and walked toward the hospital exit. In the taxi back home, she looked through the window at the buildings passing like ghosts in the night. She didn't know that just 20 miles away, Richard Wellington was in his office reviewing documents for an important merger. She didn't know that while reviewing the papers, he had found something that would make him question everything he thought he knew about connections, about family, and about the young woman he had dismissed that afternoon. But she would find out soon. For now, Maria Elena Rodriguez was returning to her small apartment with a shaken but unbroken faith. Because mothers don't have the luxury of giving up. And sometimes, when everything seems lost, the universe has mysterious ways of evening the score. The alarm sounded at 4:30 a.m., but Maria was already awake. She had spent the night staring at the ceiling of her small apartment, calculating numbers that didn't add up anywhere. $3,000. She could work day and night for the rest of her life and wouldn't get them in time. She got up silently and went to Santiago's room. His bed was empty. The pillow still held the shape of his little head, but he was in the hospital. Her child, her reason for living, fighting against a disease she couldn't afford to cure. In the kitchen, she prepared coffee with the beans she had bought on sale the week before. While the dark liquid brewed, she observed the table where Santiago did his homework. His notebooks were organized, his pencils sharpened. A 6-year-old more organized than many adults. He had to be. The illness had stolen the carefree nature of childhood. Her phone vibrated. A text message from her boss at the night cleaning service. Maria, I need you to cover Carmen's shift tonight. Corporate building in Manhattan. Triple pay, triple pay. Maria quickly did the math. With luck, it would give her enough for 1 dose of the medications. 1 dose that would last 3 days. A drop in the ocean of what she needed. She immediately responded, I'll be there. She showered with cold water, the heater had stopped working last month, and dressed in her cleaning uniform. The irony wasn't lost on her. Yesterday she had gone to a job interview dreaming of corporate offices. Today she would return to clean them in the early morning, invisible to the world that had rejected her. Before leaving, she stopped in front of the makeshift altar in her living room. An image of the Virgin of Guadalupe, a crucifix that had belonged to her grandmother, and a photo of Santiago on his first day of school, smiling despite the oxygen mask hanging around his neck. Little Virgin, she whispered, touching the image, I know I have no right to ask you for anything after doubting yesterday. But I'm not doing it for me. I'm doing it for him. Give me a sign. Anything. The bus to Manhattan was full of early morning workers like her. Invisible people who kept a city running that ignored them. Maria knew their stories without needing to ask. Single mothers, immigrants, people who worked 2 or 3 jobs to survive. She arrived at the corporate building at 9 p.m. The night security guard, an older man named Roberto, greeted her with a tired smile. How's the boy, Maria? Fighting, she replied simply. Roberto nodded. He also had sick grandchildren. He understood. Maria went up to the 35th floor. The building was elegant, with glass offices that during the day buzzed with activity. Now they were empty, filled only with shadows and the echo of her footsteps. She started with the main offices. Each desk told a story, family photos from expensive vacations, diplomas from prestigious universities, golf trophies, memories of a life she would never have. In a particularly luxurious office, she found documents scattered on the desk. While organizing the papers to clean underneath, her eyes stopped on a familiar name, Wellington and Associates. Her heart raced. It was a consulting contract. Wellington had been hired for a corporate merger for a sum that took her breath away, $2 million. For a job that would probably take him a few weeks. $2 million. While her son was dying for lack of 3,000. The tears came again, but this time not from sadness, but from pure, burning rage. That man who had humiliated her, who had treated her like trash, would earn in a month more money than she would see in her entire life. She continued cleaning with mechanical movements, but her mind couldn't stop thinking about the injustice. Why were some born with everything served on a silver platter while others had to beg for crumbs? At 2 a.m. she took her break. She sat on the bathroom floor, eating a peanut butter sandwich she had prepared at home. In her uniform pocket, her phone vibrated. It was a message from the hospital. "Mrs. Rodriguez, Santiago is asking for you. He's awake if you want to make a video call." With trembling hands, she dialed the number. Her son's face appeared on the small screen, pale but smiling. "Mommy. Where are you?" "At work, my love." "How do you feel?" "Better. Nurse Maria gave me strawberry gelatin. You know it's my favorite." "Of course I know, sweetheart." "Mommy, why are you crying?" Maria quickly wiped her cheeks. She hadn't realized the tears had returned. "I'm not crying, love. I'm just tired." "Mommy." Santiago looked at her with those wise eyes that only children who have suffered too much possess. "I know you're worried about the money for my medicines." Maria felt as if a knife had been plunged into her chest. "Santiago, you don't have to worry about that. That's my job, but I pray every night for God to send us an angel. And you know what, Mommy? I think he already sent one." "What do you mean?" "Today a man came to the hospital. A very elegant man. He was visiting other sick children, giving money for their medicines. The nurse said he was very rich and had a good heart." Maria's heart stopped. "What was that man's name?" "I don't remember well, something like Wellington." "Yes, that was it. Mr. Wellington." The phone almost fell from her hands. Richard Wellington. The same man who had humiliated her that morning was at the hospital where her son was fighting for his life. Donating money to other sick children. "Mommy, are you there?" "Yes, my love. Yes, I'm here. Tomorrow he's going to come back. The nurse says maybe he can help me too." Isn't that exciting? Maria didn't know what to answer. How could she explain to a 6-year-old that the man who could save him was the same one who had destroyed her hopes that morning? "Go to sleep, sweetheart. Tomorrow I'll come see you early." "I love you, Mommy." "I love you too, Santiago. More than anything in the world." She hung up the call and sat on the bathroom floor, processing what she had just heard. Wellington at the hospital. Wellington donating money. Wellington who could save Santiago with the money he spent on ties. She got up and returned to cleaning, but now she had a plan forming in her mind. A desperate plan, but a plan nonetheless. Tomorrow she would return to the hospital. Tomorrow she would confront Richard Wellington again, but this time would be different. This time she wouldn't go as a job applicant. She would go as a mother fighting for her son's life. And if she had learned anything in these 6 years of constant battle, it was that a desperate mother was the most powerful force in the universe. She didn't know that Wellington had also spent a sleepless night. She didn't know that he had been reviewing old documents until the early hours, finding connections that had left him frozen. But she would find out soon, because fate has cruel ways of weaving stories that seem separate, until suddenly they're revealed to be parts of the same plot. Richard Wellington hadn't slept all night. In his 47th floor office, surrounded by documents scattered everywhere, he held in his hands a photograph he had found buried in his father's files. The photograph was from 25 years ago. In it, his father, Charles Wellington, smiled alongside a dark-skinned man impeccably dressed. Between them, a beautiful woman with delicate features held a baby with big, expressive eyes in her arms. On the back of the photo, in his father's perfect handwriting, was written, "With my founding partner Eduardo Rodriguez, his wife Carmen and little Maria Elena." 1998. Eduardo Rodriguez. The name that had been erased from the company's official history. The brilliant man who had put up the initial capital, the international connections, and the revolutionary ideas that turned Wellington and Associates into the empire it was today. Richard closed his eyes, allowing the forbidden memories to return. His father had told him the truth only once, on his deathbed. "Son, Charles had whispered with a broken voice, "There are things I did, things I'm not proud of. Dad, rest. You don't have to. Eduardo was more than my partner. He was my best friend. He was a financial genius who saw opportunities where others saw problems. But when the company started to grow, when the big clients began to arrive, Charles had closed his eyes, as if the words physically hurt him. The clients didn't want to deal with a man of color. No matter how brilliant Eduardo was, no matter that he was the one designing the strategies, the white multimillionaires wanted to see faces like theirs at the front of the company. What did you do, Dad? I bought his share. I told him it was a business decision, that he would understand. I paid him fairly according to the value at that moment, but, his voice broke. I never imagined what the company would become. Eduardo was left with crumbs of what he built. Richard remembered asking what had happened to Eduardo. He died 5 years later in a car accident. His wife Carmen too. They left a daughter. Maria Elena. Maria Elena Rodriguez. The young woman he had humiliated yesterday wasn't just another job applicant. She was the daughter of the man who had built the foundations of everything the Wellington family possessed. Richard got up from his desk and walked to the window. The city spread before him like a chessboard where he had always been the king. But now he felt like an imposter. He took his phone and dialed a number he knew by heart. Morrison Investigations, Patricia speaking. Pat, it's Richard Wellington. I need you to investigate someone. Maria Elena Rodriguez, approximately 23 years old, single mother. Sure, Richard. What do you need to know? Everything. Where she lives, where she works, her family situation. And Pat, do it quickly. He hung up and returned to the documents. There were more photographs. Eduardo in the original office, designing strategies on a whiteboard. Eduardo at a business dinner, clearly the smartest at the table. Eduardo the day they signed their first $1 million contract, embracing Charles like brothers. How had his father allowed this to happen? How had he lived with that betrayal for so many years? The phone rang. Patricia had been efficient as always. Richard, I have the information you requested. Maria Elena Rodriguez, 23 years old, single mother of a 6-year-old boy named Santiago. Lives in a 1-bedroom apartment in Queens. Works 3 jobs, night cleaning, weekend waitressing, and childcare on Tuesdays and Thursdays. Richard took notes while Patricia continued. Her son has a serious medical condition. Cystic fibrosis. He's been in and out of General Hospital for the last 2 years. The medical records I could access show he needs specialized medications that cost approximately $3,000 monthly. $3,000. An insignificant amount for Richard, but obviously impossible for Maria. Anything else? Yes. She's brilliant. She graduated summa cum laude from New York University with a degree in business administration. She speaks Spanish, English, and French. She's been applying for finance jobs for the last 6 months without success. Richard knew why she hadn't been successful. He knew her. He had seen her in action yesterday. The racism that had destroyed her father's opportunities was also destroying hers. Patricia, one more thing. Have you found anything about her father? Eduardo Rodriguez died in 2006, along with his wife Carmen. Car accident. Maria Elena was 4 years old when she was orphaned. She was raised by her maternal grandmother until age 16, when the grandmother died of cancer. Orphaned at 4 years old. Alone in the world at 16. Single mother at 17, struggling to keep a sick son alive while the world closed doors on her because of the color of her skin. Richard felt something he hadn't experienced in years, real shame. He hung up the phone and went to his office safe. Inside, along with important documents and family jewelry, was his father's will. He had read it dozens of times, but had never paid attention to a particular clause. If Eduardo Rodriguez or his descendants ever need help, it is the Wellington family's responsibility to provide it. This debt is not only financial, but moral, a moral debt. His father had known what he had done and had lived with that guilt until the day he died. Richard looked at his watch. 10:30 a.m. In a few hours he would go to the hospital as planned for his monthly charity visit. It was something he had started after his father's death, a way to cleanse his conscience for sins he didn't believe were his. But now he knew the truth. His father's sins had become his the moment he humiliated Maria Elena Rodriguez. He took his coat and headed toward the door. He had to get to the hospital before she showed up. He needed time to process how he was going to handle this situation. How does someone tell a woman they just destroyed that their family owes everything they possess to her? How do you apologize for decades of injustice? As he descended in the elevator, Richard Wellington realized that for the first time in his privileged life, he had no idea what to do. The photograph remained in his pocket, along with the weight of a truth that would change everything. In a few hours, in the hallways of General Hospital, two destinies that had been separated by greed and prejudice would finally meet again. And this time, the conversation would be very different. Maria arrived at General Hospital at 2 p.m., her heart beating like a war drum. She had left her other two jobs for the day. She couldn't afford to lose the money, but she also couldn't afford to lose this opportunity. If Wellington was really donating money to sick children, she would do whatever was necessary to get that help for Santiago. Even if it meant begging the man who had humiliated her. She went up to the third floor and headed to the nursing station. Mrs. Rodriguez, the head nurse, greeted her. Santiago has been asking for you all morning. And you're right about that, Mr. Wellington. He arrived early and already donated for 3 families. Is he still here? Yes, he's in the playroom with some children. Room 320. Maria walked down the hallway, each step heavier than the last. Through the window of the playroom, she saw him. Richard Wellington, the man who yesterday had treated her like trash, was sitting on the floor playing with sick children. He had changed his $1,000 suit for a casual shirt, but his posture still radiated power and privilege. What surprised her was his expression. It wasn't yesterday's condescending smile. There was something different in his eyes. Something that looked like pain. She took a deep breath and entered the room. Mr. Wellington. He looked up and for a moment, Maria saw something she hadn't expected, pure, raw guilt in his eyes. Miss Rodriguez. He stood up quickly, almost tripping over the toys. I didn't expect to see you here. My son is in this hospital. Santiago Rodriguez. Wellington visibly paled. Your son. Santiago, the child I told you about yesterday. The one who needs $3,000 a month in medications to live. The other children continued playing, oblivious to the tension that filled the room like toxic smoke. Miss Rodriguez, we need to talk. Could we go somewhere private? Here is fine. I have nothing to hide. Wellington looked around nervously. Miss Rodriguez. Maria Elena, there are things you don't know. Things about your family. About my family, what do you mean? Wellington took a photograph from his shirt pocket. It was old, yellowed with years. He extended it to her with trembling hands. Maria took it and felt as if the world stopped. In the photograph was her father. Eduardo Rodriguez, the man who had died when she was 4 years old, of whom she barely preserved blurred memories. Next to him, a younger version of Wellington's father. And in her mother's arms. That's you, Wellington whispered. When you were a baby, where did you get this? From my father's files. Maria Elena, your father wasn't just any employee. He was the founding partner of Wellington and Associates. He put up the initial capital. He designed the strategies that made us rich. The words hit Maria like physical punches. That's impossible. My father worked in a small office. We were poor. When he died, he left nothing, because my father took everything from him. The silence that followed was deafening. Maria sat heavily in a small plastic chair, designed for children, but which at this moment seemed perfect for someone whose world had just collapsed. Explain. Her voice was barely a whisper. Wellington sat in front of her, also in a child's chair, the photograph between them like evidence of a crime that had remained hidden for decades. Your father was a genius. He saw opportunities where others saw problems. When the company started to grow, when the first multimillionaire clients arrived, Wellington stopped, as if the words physically hurt him. The clients didn't want to deal with a man of color. No matter how brilliant your father was, how visionary. They only saw his skin. Maria felt nauseous. So my father bought his share of the company. He told him it was a business decision, that he would understand. He paid him what it was worth at that moment, but... Maria Elena, if your father had kept his stake, today it would be worth hundreds of millions of dollars. Hundreds of millions. Your father built everything my family owns. And we stole it from him using his own prejudice against him. Maria stood up abruptly, the chair falling backward with a noise that made the children look at them. Are you telling me that my family should be rich? That while my son is dying for lack of $3,000, you have hundreds of millions that belong to us? Yes, Wellington also stood up, his eyes filled with tears. That's exactly what I'm telling you. Maria began pacing in circles, processing the information. 20 years of poverty. Her grandmother working until she died to raise her. She struggling since age 16. Santiago sick without medicines. All while the Wellingtons lived in mansions built with money stolen from her family. Why are you telling me this now? She turned toward him, her eyes burning with fury. Why not yesterday when you humiliated me in your office? Because yesterday I didn't know who you were. I found the photograph last night, after what I did to you, after what you did to me. Maria approached him, her voice rising. You treated me like trash. You told me my kind of people had no place in your company. The company my father built. The children had fallen silent, sensing the tension although they didn't understand the words. Maria Elena, I know I have no right to ask for forgiveness. You're right. You have no right to anything. Wellington took an envelope from his jacket. This is a check for $500,000. For Santiago's medications, for your expenses, so you can live with dignity while we decide how to handle this. Maria looked at the check as if it were a poisonous snake. Do you think you can buy my silence? Do you think you can wash away decades of theft with a check? It's not to buy your silence. It's because it's the right thing to do. Because your son shouldn't suffer for our father's sins, the sins of your father. And yours too. Maria took the check, but not to keep it. She tore it into small pieces and let them fall like confetti to the floor. I don't want your dirty money, Mr. Wellington. I want justice. Wellington looked at her with something that could have been respect. What do you want me to do? I want the world to know the truth. I want them to know that Wellington and Associates was built on theft and racism. She stopped. Through the playroom window, she could see Santiago's room. Her child, connected to machines, struggling to breathe. Reality hit her like a bucket of cold water. She could be right, she could demand justice, she could expose the Wellingtons. But while she did all that, Santiago would die. Wellington followed her gaze. Your son can have all the medications he needs. Today. You just have to tell me yes. Maria closed her eyes. In her mind, she heard her grandmother's voice, Mija, sometimes God puts us in situations where we have to choose between our pride and our love. When she opened her eyes, Wellington was still waiting for her answer. The truth had come to light. But now she had to decide what to do with it. Maria remained silent for what seemed like an eternity. Wellington could hear his own breathing, his racing heartbeat, the hum of medical machines in the hallway. I need to see my son, Maria finally said, her voice controlled but trembling at the edges. Of course. They walked in silence toward room 312. Santiago was awake, drawing in a notebook with crayons a nurse had given him. Mommy! He shouted when he saw her enter. Look, I drew our house, but with a big garden and pretty flowers. Maria approached the bed, took the drawing, and felt her heart break. On the paper, Santiago had drawn a happy family, a mom, a child, and curiously, a male figure in a suit. Who is he, my love? She asked, pointing to the male figure. He's the man who's going to help us. Mr. Wellington. He's back there. Santiago pointed toward the door where Wellington stood, clearly uncomfortable. Hello, Santiago, Wellington said, slowly approaching. I like your drawing. Thank you. Are you really going to help my mommy get my medicines? Wellington looked at Maria, waiting for some signal. She nodded almost imperceptibly. Yes, Santiago. I'm going to help. I knew God would send us an angel. Santiago smiled, that pure smile that only children who still believe in miracles have. Maria bit her lip to keep from crying. Her son had been praying for an angel, and the angel had turned out to be the demon who had destroyed her family. Santiago, Mr. Wellington and I have to talk about boring adult things. Can you keep drawing? Sure, Mommy. I'm going to make another drawing where there are no more machines and I can run like other kids. They left the room and headed to the hospital chapel. It was the same place where Maria had prayed desperately 2 nights before, asking for a sign. They sat in the last row of pews. What exactly do you want from me? Maria asked. I want to do the right thing. Your family deserves to be compensated for what my father did. For what I allowed to continue. Compensated? Mr. Wellington, you don't understand. It's not just about money. It's about destroyed lives. My grandmother worked until she died trying to raise me. I've worked 3 jobs since I was 16. My son has suffered because I haven't been able to afford the best treatments. Wellington nodded, his face pale. You're right. And I know that nothing I do can repair that damage. But I can try to make the future different. How? Wellington took a deep breath. Legally, you and Santiago are Eduardo Rodriguez heirs. I have documents that prove he was the true founding partner. I can immediately transfer 50% of Wellington and Associates to you. Maria looked at him as if he had spoken in another language. 50% of the entire company. Stocks, properties, bank accounts. Everything. Current value, approximately $800 million. The number floated in the air between them like something unreal. $800 million. Maria had fought to get 3,000. Why would you do that? Because it's what should have happened 25 years ago. Because your father built that company as much as mine did. Because, Wellington stopped. Because yesterday when I humiliated you, I saw in your eyes the same pain my father must have seen in Eduardo's eyes when he betrayed him. Maria got up and walked toward the altar. The image of Jesus crucified looked down at her, and for the first time in days, she felt something like peace. If I do this, she said without turning around, if I accept what you're offering, what happens to the truth? To justice, the truth comes to light. We make a public statement. We confess what happened. Your father receives the recognition he deserves, even if posthumously. And you? What happens to your reputation? To your career? Wellington joined her in front of the altar. My reputation was built on a lie. My career was built on stolen money. Maybe it's time I paid for my father's sins, and mine. Maria turned toward him. Yours? Yesterday I treated you exactly like my father treated yours. With contempt, with racism, with the arrogance of someone who believes they deserve what they have. My father's sins became mine the moment I repeated his mistakes. For the first time since this nightmare had begun, Maria saw something genuine in Wellington's eyes. Not self-pity, not manipulation, but real repentance. I need time to think, of course. But Maria Elena, Wellington hesitated. Santiago's medications can't wait. Regardless of what you decide about the rest, let me take care of his medical expenses. As an advance on what legally belongs to you. Maria nodded slowly. All right. But Mr. Wellington, when I make my final decision, it will be definitive. If I accept your offer, I want everything. The complete truth, complete reparation, and public recognition of what my father meant to that company. You'll have it, and if I reject it, if you reject it, I'll respect your decision. But I'll find another way to make sure Santiago has everything he needs. Maria extended her hand. Give me 48 hours. Wellington shook her hand, surprised by the firmness of her grip. 48 hours. As they left the chapel, neither of them knew that someone else had been following this story from the shadows. Patricia Morrison, the private investigator Wellington had hired, had begun asking questions on her own. And what she had discovered went beyond what either of them imagined. In her office, Patricia looked at documents she had obtained from unofficial sources. Documents suggesting that the car accident that had killed Maria's parents hadn't been exactly an accident. She took her phone and dialed Wellington's number. Richard, we need to talk. Urgently. What's wrong, Pat? It's about Eduardo Rodriguez's death. I think there's more to this story than your father told you. The line went silent. What do you mean? I mean, maybe your father didn't just rob Eduardo Rodriguez. Maybe he also had him killed. The phone fell from Wellington's hands. In the hospital hallway, Maria was returning to her son's room, not knowing that the truth she had just discovered was only the tip of the iceberg. The story was much darker than either of them had imagined. The 48 hours had passed like an eternity and a blink at the same time. Maria had spent every waking minute praying, thinking, calculating. Santiago had received his medications, Wellington had kept his word immediately, and for the first time in months, her son had slept without difficulty breathing. But the relief for Santiago mixed with a deeper anguish. During these 2 days, Maria had investigated on her own. She had visited the library, searched the internet, talked to people who knew her father, and what she had discovered had left her frozen. Her father hadn't just been brilliant. He had been revolutionary. The financial strategies that Wellington and Associates used to this day had been designed by Eduardo Rodriguez. The international contacts that made the company grow came from the network her father had meticulously built. Eduardo Rodriguez hadn't been the minor partner. He had been the brain of the operation. Now, Maria walked toward Wellington's office on the 47th floor, but this time she wasn't going as a supplicant. She was going as the rightful heir to an empire built on her father's genius. The secretary recognized her immediately. "Miss Rodriguez, Mr. Wellington is waiting for you." The office doors opened and Maria entered with her head held high. Wellington was standing by the window, exactly as he had been 3 days before when he had humiliated her. But now everything was different. "Miss Rodriguez. Maria Elena. Thank you for coming, Mr. Wellington. I've made my decision." He turned, and Maria could see that the last 2 days hadn't been easy for him either. He had deep dark circles, wrinkled clothes, and the expression of someone who had faced demons in the mirror. "Before you tell me your decision, there's something else you need to know." Maria frowned. "What?" Wellington walked to his desk and took a thick folder. "My private investigator found additional information about your parents' death." Maria's heart stopped. What kind of information? "The car accident, maybe it wasn't an accident." The words fell like bombs in the room. Maria staggered and had to lean on a chair. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying there's evidence that my father might have orchestrated Eduardo Rodriguez's death." Maria felt as if the world was collapsing around her for the second time in 3 days. "Why?" "Because your father had begun asking questions. He had hired lawyers. He was investigating the real valuation of the company. He had realized he had been swindled for much more money than he thought." Wellington opened the folder and showed her documents, photographs, police reports. "The accident occurred 3 days before your father had a scheduled meeting with the SEC to report financial fraud. 3 days before he was going to sue to recover his fair share of the company." Maria read the documents with trembling hands. Mechanic reports that had found irregularities in the car's brakes. Witnesses who had mysteriously disappeared before giving their statements. A detective who had been suddenly transferred to another case. "Are you telling me that your father killed my parents to protect the money he had stolen from them?" "I can't prove it completely. Too many years have passed, many witnesses have died, documents have disappeared. But Patricia found enough evidence to suggest that, yes. I believe my father was responsible for your parents' death." Maria sat heavily, processing this new devastation. They hadn't just stolen her inheritance. They had murdered her parents to keep it. "Mr. Wellington," her voice was a whisper. "Did you know this when you rejected me in this office 3 days ago?" "No. I swear on my own family's life, I didn't know." Maria stood slowly and walked to the window, looking at the city that spread below. All that wealth, all that power, built on her father's genius and cemented with her parents' blood. "What was your original offer?" she asked without turning around. 50% of the company. $800 million. Public recognition of what your father contributed. "It's not enough." Wellington swallowed hard. "What do you want?" Maria turned, and Wellington saw something in her eyes that hadn't been there before. It wasn't just pain or anger. It was something more dangerous, it was absolute determination. "I want everything, everything." Wellington and Associates should be called Rodriguez and Associates. My father was the true founder. I want 100% of the company. I want you to work for me, not with me. I want every employee, every client, every person in the financial world to know that this company was built by Eduardo Rodriguez and stolen by the Wellingtons. Wellington remained silent, and I want you to publicly confess not only the theft, but the suspicion of murder. I want a complete criminal investigation to be conducted. Maria Elena, if I do that, I'll go to prison. Even though I had nothing to do with the deaths, as my father's heir, as someone who benefited from the crime, you should go to prison. Maria approached him. But more than that, I want you to live knowing you lost everything because of your father's sins. I want you to feel what I've felt my whole life, the desperation of having nothing. And if I refuse? Maria smiled, but there was no joy in that smile. Then I'll do it myself. I have evidence now. I have the photograph. I have the documents your investigator found. And I have something you don't have. What? I have nothing to lose. You do. Wellington walked to his desk and sat down. For several minutes, the only sound in the office was the ticking of his father's clock on the wall. If I accept your terms, if I give you everything, what happens to me? You will work as an employee in the company your father stole from my family. You'll earn a fair salary, nothing more. You'll live modestly. And every day, when you come to work, you'll remember that justice sometimes comes late, but it always comes. And Santiago? Santiago will have the best medical care in the world. He'll grow up knowing who his grandfather really was. And when he's older, he'll decide whether to continue with the family business, the business that was always ours. Wellington opened his desk drawer and took out a golden pen. I'll need time to prepare the legal documents. No, Maria approached the desk. The documents are already prepared. I brought them with me. She placed a folder on the desk. Wellington opened it and saw pages and pages of legal documents, all perfectly drafted. How? It turns out that when you study law at night while cleaning offices, you learn some useful things. And it turns out there are many lawyers who are more than willing to take a case like this pro bono when they learn the complete story. Wellington read the documents. It was a complete transfer. Everything. The company, the properties, the bank accounts, even the building where they were sitting. Maria Elena, one more question. What? Can you ever forgive me? Not for what my father did, but for what I did to you. For the humiliation, for the racism, for treating your pain as if it didn't matter. Maria looked at him for a long moment. Ask me again in 10 years, when you've proven you've really changed. When you've lived with the consequences of your actions. When you've felt what it's like to be powerless. Wellington took the pen and, without further hesitation, began to sign. Page after page after page. When he finished, Maria Elena Rodriguez was officially the owner of the empire that had always belonged to her family. There's one more thing, Maria said as she collected the signed documents. What? Your desk. I want you to clear it out now. That will be my desk starting tomorrow. Wellington nodded and began collecting his personal belongings. When he reached his father's clock, he hesitated. You can keep it, Maria said. So you remember every second of every day what it costs to live with a dirty conscience. 20 minutes later, Richard Wellington was leaving the building that had been his kingdom, carrying a cardboard box with his personal belongings. Maria remained alone in the office, sitting in the executive chair, looking at the city from the window. Her phone rang. It was the hospital. Mrs. Rodriguez, Santiago is asking when you're coming. He says he has something important to tell you. I'm on my way, Maria responded, smiling for the first time in days. She got up, took the photograph of her parents from the desk, and left the office. Tomorrow she would begin her new life as CEO of Rodriguez and Associates. But today, she had to hug her son and tell him that his prayers had been answered in ways he had never imagined. 6 months later, Maria Elena Rodriguez walked through the hallways of the building that now bore her father's name in golden letters, Rodriguez and Associates. Each step resonated with the authority she had inherited by right, but earned through pain. In her office on the 47th floor, the same one where she had been humiliated, she had framed the photograph of her parents next to a Wall Street Journal article with the headline, "The biggest financial scandal of the decade, the true story behind the Wellington Empire." The door opened and Richard Wellington entered, carrying a coffee tray. He wore a simple suit, not the $1,000 ones he used to wear. His hair had more gray and his eyes had lost the arrogance that once defined them. "Your coffee, Mrs. Rodriguez," he said, placing the cup on the desk. "Thank you, Richard. How are the quarterly reports going?" "Finished. The numbers are excellent. The company has grown 40% since you took control." Maria nodded. It wasn't surprising. She had implemented the visions her father had outlined in his personal journals, documents she had found among her grandmother's belongings after taking control of the company. "Richard, sit down for a moment." He hesitated. In these 6 months, he had learned to read Maria's expressions. This wasn't her boss voice. It was something different. "Is something wrong?" "On the contrary. I have news." Maria opened an envelope that had been on her desk all morning. "The FBI finished their investigation into my parents' death." Wellington paled. "And they found enough evidence to confirm that your father orchestrated the murder. Paid contacts, bribed mechanics, threatened witnesses. Everything." Richard collapsed in the chair, covering his face with his hands. "My God, your father is dead, so he can't be prosecuted. But his name will be officially linked to the murder. His legacy will be destroyed forever. And me, you didn't know anything. The FBI confirmed it. You're guilty of many things, Richard, but not murder." Wellington looked up, tears running down his cheeks. "Maria Elena. I don't know how to live with this. Every day I come here, every time I see your parents' photo, every time I read the name Rodriguez on the walls, I feel like I'm drowning in guilt." Maria got up and walked to the window. The view was the same as always, but now she saw it with different eyes. "Do you know what my grandmother told me before she died?" "What?" "She told me that God doesn't punish us to destroy us. He punishes us to save us. So we learn what really matters." She turned toward him. "Have you learned, Richard?" "I've learned that money built on others' pain doesn't bring happiness. I've learned that racism isn't just bad for the victims, but destroys the soul of those who practice it. I've learned that," his voice broke. "I've learned that I lost my humanity long ago and maybe I'll never fully recover it." Maria returned to her desk and opened another envelope. "There's something else." "What?" "Santiago has been in complete remission for 3 months. The doctors say the treatment was so successful that he might never need medications again." Wellington's eyes filled with tears of relief. That's wonderful. And tomorrow is his 7th birthday. He's going to have a party at the hospital to celebrate with all the children we've been helping." In these 6 months, Maria had established a foundation that paid medical treatment for hundreds of sick children. The Eduardo and Carmen Rodriguez Foundation had become the largest medical charity organization on the East Coast. "Richard, I want Santiago to know the complete story when he's older. The real story, without lies. But I also want him to see that people can change. That genuine repentance can lead to redemption." "What are you trying to say?" Maria opened the last envelope of the day. "These are promotion papers. I'm appointing you director of the Eduardo and Carmen Rodriguez Foundation." Wellington looked at her as if she had spoken in another language. "I don't understand." "You've worked honestly these 6 months. You've lived with the consequences of your actions. You've shown genuine repentance. And more importantly," Maria approached him. "Santiago asked about you last week. He said he wanted to invite you to his birthday party." "Why would he do that?" "Because children see things adults don't see. He sees a man who has changed. He sees someone who genuinely cares about his well-being." Wellington took the papers with trembling hands. "Maria Elena. I don't deserve this." "You're right. You don't deserve it. But you need it. And more importantly, the sick children need it. You have connections, experience, and now you have something you didn't have before." "What?" "A real purpose. An opportunity to use your privilege for something good instead of maintaining injustice." Wellington read the documents. The salary was modest, but the work was meaningful. He would direct a foundation that would save lives. "Why are you doing this?" Maria returned to her chair and took the photograph of her parents. "Because my father was a man who believed in second chances. Because my mother was a woman who believed in forgiveness. And because my grandmother taught me that revenge can give you temporary satisfaction, but only forgiveness can give you permanent peace." "Are you forgiving me?" Maria considered the question carefully. I'm giving you the opportunity to earn forgiveness. The rest depends on you. That afternoon, Maria arrived at General Hospital for Santiago's birthday party. The playroom was decorated with balloons and there was a huge cake with candles shaped like the number 7. Santiago ran toward her with an energy he hadn't had in years. "Mommy! Look how many friends came to my party." The room was full of children who had been treated thanks to the foundation, their families, doctors, nurses. People whose lives had been touched by the transformation of pain into purpose. "Mommy, did Mr. Wellington come?" "Yes, my love. He's over there talking to Dr. Ramirez." Santiago ran toward Wellington, who was indeed conversing with the doctor about the new treatments the foundation had made possible. "Mr. Wellington, I came to invite you to blow out the candles with me." Wellington knelt down to Santiago's level. "Are you sure? It's your birthday." "Yes, but you helped make it possible. Mommy says you're going to help many more children." "I'm going to try, Santiago. I'm going to do everything I can." As Wellington and Santiago blew out the candles together, Maria watched from a corner. In her purse, she carried a letter she had written that morning but hadn't yet decided whether to send. It was a letter to the editor of the New York Times, telling not only the story of theft and murder, but also the story of redemption. The story of how hate can transform into love, how injustice can become justice, and how even the deepest wounds can heal when given time and forgiveness. She decided she would send it. The world needed to know that stories don't always end with revenge. That sometimes, they end with something more powerful, grace. At the end of the party, after everyone had left, Maria stayed alone with Santiago in his hospital room, which they now used only for routine checkups. "Mommy, can I ask you something?" "Of course, my love. Why did you forgive Mr. Wellington?" "Grandma always said that bad people must pay for what they do." Maria smiled, remembering her grandmother's exact words. "Grandma also said that God puts us on earth to be instruments of His justice. But His justice doesn't always look like we think it should look." "What do you mean?" "Sometimes, true justice isn't punishing someone until you destroy them. Sometimes, true justice is giving them the opportunity to become the person they should have been from the beginning." Santiago nodded with the seriousness that only children who have seen too much suffering but retain hope possess. "Do you think Mr. Wellington is going to become a good person?" Maria looked through the window at the city she now knew from both sides, from below as a woman who had cleaned its buildings in the early morning, and from above as the owner of one of its most powerful empires. "I think he's already on his way, my love. And I think your grandfather Eduardo would be proud to see us helping someone find their way back to the light." That night, Maria Elena Rodriguez returned to her apartment. She had decided to stay in the same place, because she never wanted to forget where she came from. At her makeshift altar, she added a new photograph, Santiago blowing out candles with Wellington, surrounded by smiling children whose lives had been saved. She knelt before the image of the Virgin of Guadalupe and whispered, "Thank you, little Virgin, for showing me that true justice isn't just recovering what belongs to us, but using what we have to heal the world." Outside, the city continued its eternal rhythm. But in a small apartment in Queens, a woman who had transformed pain into power, injustice into redemption, and hate into love, finally slept in peace. Because she had learned the most powerful lesson of all, that God's vengeance doesn't always come as destruction, but sometimes as the opportunity to create something beautiful from the ashes of what was destroyed. And sometimes, just sometimes, that's more powerful than any punishment.